These people are not powerful. Satan can't create anything. That includes blessings for his people. That's why the #1 job of somebody that sold their soul in Hollywood is?
Hollywood has always sold one promise. Talent wins. Hard work rises. Fame is earned. But what if that story is the cover for something far darker? According to Katt Williams, success in Hollywood is not awarded. It is approved, and once approval is granted, the price is never just money. For decades, whispers have followed black entertainers at the highest level. Sudden rises, strange falls, forced silence, public humiliation. Katt Williams claims these are not coincidences. They are conditions. And he says 9 well-known names were pulled into that system. Kevin Hart, the perfect choice. Kevin Hart's rise did not follow the traditional path that comedy legends before him were forced to walk. For decades, stand-up comedy was a slow burn. Years in empty rooms, bombing on stage, being ignored by networks, grinding until the craft was undeniable. That path shaped figures like Richard Pryor, Bernie Mac, Dave Chappelle, and Katt Williams himself. Kevin Hart's ascent, however, looked very different. Within a short window, he went from a working comedian to an everywhere figure. Movies, talk shows, endorsement deals, stadium tours, and global branding arrived with shocking speed. To critics like Katt Williams, that speed was not a coincidence. It was a signal. In the comedy world, sudden elevation is rare. Not impossible, but rare. The industry usually tests resistance first. Rejection builds character. Time filters out those who break. Kevin Hart appeared to bypass that filter. Instead of being hardened by years of rejection, he was embraced early. Roles kept coming even when early films underperformed. Specials were promoted heavily regardless of critical response. Opportunities multiplied rather than slowed. According to Katt Williams, that is the first sign of industry favoritism. Not talent being rewarded, but compliance being noticed. The difference between favoritism and earned progression becomes clearer when compared to those who challenged the system. Comics who spoke out about contracts, ownership, or creative control often found doors quietly closing. Kevin Hart, by contrast, became known as agreeable, easy to work with, grateful, flexible. These traits are often praised publicly, but behind closed doors they carry deeper meaning. They suggest someone who will not ask uncomfortable questions, someone who will not push back when told no, someone who understands that survival requires alignment. Obedience versus resistance is the real divider in this story. Katt Williams has repeatedly stated that Hollywood does not reward rebellion. It rewards reliability. Kevin Hart, in this framing, represents the perfect choice. Not the loudest, not the sharpest, but the safest. He adapts his image constantly. He mocks himself before others can. He leans into humiliation as humor, removing any threat of defiance. By laughing at himself, he disarms criticism and signals submission at the same time. If Kevin Hart represents acceptance of the rules, the next figure shows what survival looks like when silence becomes strategy. Jamie Foxx, the survivor. Jamie Foxx occupies a strange and almost untouchable position in Hollywood. He is one of the very few black entertainers to conquer every major field without being publicly destroyed. Stand-up comedy, television, film, music, awards, box office success, critical acclaim, cultural respect. His resume is not built on hype but on undeniable skill. And yet, despite moving through the same industry Katt Williams describes as hostile to independent thinkers, Jamie Foxx remains standing. According to Katt, that is not luck. That is survival intelligence. Unlike others who challenged the system openly, Jamie Foxx never positioned himself as a rebel. He did not lecture. He did not expose. He did not attack the industry publicly. Even when his talent eclipsed peers, he remained careful with his voice.
And the Oscar goes to Jamie Foxx and Ray.
This is the first Academy Award and second nomination for Jamie Foxx.
When he won an Oscar for his performance as Ray Charles, he did not use that moment to demand change or criticize power. He accepted the praise, thanked the machine, and kept moving. That restraint matters. In Hollywood, brilliance is tolerated only when it does not threaten control. Jamie's rare multi-field success should have made him a target. Historically, the system crushes artists who become too powerful without permission. But Jamie avoided that fate by mastering timing. He speaks when it is safe. He disappears when it is not. When major scandals erupt, names swirl, and the media hunts for reactions, Jamie Foxx is often absent. He does not tweet outrage. He does not defend anyone publicly. He does not condemn. He waits. Silence becomes his shield. This silence is often misunderstood as neutrality, but Katt Williams suggests it is something sharper. It is awareness. Jamie Foxx knows how information works in Hollywood. He understands that knowing too much can be as dangerous as saying too much. The safest position is to know, but never reveal. To see, but never react. To survive, not confront. Katt has never accused Jamie Foxx of submission in the way he accuses others. Instead, he describes him as someone who learned the rules early and chose a different form of resistance. Not refusal, not exposure, but adaptation. Jamie does not fight the system head-on. He navigates it like a chessboard, staying 3 moves ahead, never standing still long enough to be cornered. When controversies surface around powerful figures, Jamie's absence becomes louder than words. He steps away from the spotlight, allowing storms to pass. Then, once the air clears, he returns with a project, a performance, or a public appearance that resets his narrative. This pattern has repeated for years, and each time it reinforces the same conclusion. Jamie Foxx survives because he understands when to be visible and when to vanish. Chris Tucker, the man who walked away. Chris Tucker reached a level of success that most actors never touch. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, he was not just famous, he was dominant. His energy, timing, and physical comedy made him one of the most recognizable faces in the world. The Rush Hour films turned him into a global star, and with Rush Hour 2, he became the highest-paid actor in Hollywood at the time. $25 million for a single role. That kind of power usually leads to more control, more projects, and a longer reign. Instead, Chris Tucker vanished. At the absolute peak of his career, he stepped away. Not gradually, not quietly, almost instantly. Sequels were offered. Studios were ready. The money kept rising. And yet, Chris said no. Years passed with no major roles, no stand-up specials, no visible ambition to reclaim his position. For an industry that punishes refusal, this disappearance raised questions that never fully settled. According to Katt Williams, this was not burnout. It was escape. Chris Tucker publicly framed his exit through faith. He spoke about becoming a born-again Christian. He said he no longer wanted to participate in vulgar roles or crude humor.
What made you not come back?
It wasn't because they didn't pay me enough.
He got religious.
He didn't want to cuss.
It ain't up to me. It's a whole, I don't own Fridays. Studio own Fridays. Yeah. So it's really up to...
That explanation satisfied the surface-level narrative, but Katt suggests it was also a shield. Faith creates distance. It discourages interrogation. Once someone declares a spiritual awakening, the industry tends to step back, assuming the person has removed themselves from the game. That assumption creates space to breathe. Distance became Chris Tucker's survival tool. He did not criticize Hollywood. He did not expose anyone. He did not hint at secrets. He simply withdrew. When he returned briefly for Rush Hour 3, it was controlled, limited, and followed by another disappearance. He maintained relationships without re-entering the machine fully. Enough presence to stay alive. Enough absence to stay safe. Katt Williams frames Chris Tucker as someone who saw too much, too early. In Hollywood, information is power, but it is also danger. Knowing what happens behind closed doors creates an impossible choice. Speak and risk destruction, or stay silent and protect your life. Chris chose silence, not because he was weak, but because he understood the cost of honesty. The absence of scandal around Chris Tucker is often mistaken for innocence or ignorance. Katt suggests the opposite. The calm exterior hides the weight of restraint. When someone walks away from unlimited money, fame, and influence, it is rarely because they lack ambition. It is because the price of staying becomes heavier than the reward. Chris Tucker did not sell his image down slowly. He cut it off clean. He accepted tax problems. He accepted being forgotten by a new generation. He accepted being labeled irrelevant. All of that was easier than living inside a system that demanded silence without escape. His laughter faded. His public presence softened. The wild energy that once defined him disappeared. What remained was a man protecting himself. Katt Williams does not accuse Chris Tucker of cowardice. He treats him as a witness who chose survival, someone who understood that once you know too much, your greatest weapon is restraint. In a system that feeds on obedience and punishes resistance, Chris Tucker chose a third option. He walked away. Ludacris, the trade. Ludacris began as a threat. His early music was loud, aggressive, playful, and unapologetically rooted in Southern rap culture. He carried an edge that could not be mistaken for corporate safety. His look matched that energy. Braids, beard, street confidence. He represented independence, humor with teeth, and a refusal to soften himself for mainstream approval. That is why his transformation stands out so sharply. According to Katt Williams, it was not evolution. It was a trade. The change came fast. The braids disappeared. The beard vanished. The image became cleaner, smoother, and more neutral. At the same time, his career direction shifted. The rawness that defined his music faded into safer themes, lighter delivery, and broader appeal. Katt Williams argues that these changes were not creative curiosity. They were signals. In the entertainment industry, altering one's appearance is rarely just about style. It is about permission. Image transformation often marks the moment an artist aligns with corporate interests. Sharp edges are filed down. Visual markers of rebellion are removed. What remains is a version that can be placed anywhere without discomfort. Ludacris became that version. He was no longer a rapper who challenged the system. He became a personality that fit comfortably inside it. The reward came immediately. Major film opportunities opened. The Fast and Furious franchise transformed him from a successful rapper into a global movie star. He gained access to blockbuster budgets, international fame, and long-term financial security. According to Katt, this was the payoff for compliance. Visibility becomes the currency. The more obedient the figure, the more visible they are allowed to be. Music, once the center of Ludacris's identity, slowly became secondary. His early albums carried aggression and personality. Later releases felt restrained, less risky, less urgent. Meanwhile, his on-screen roles were safe, predictable, and non-threatening. He played characters designed to support the story, not disrupt it. No controversy, No sharp commentary, no rebellion, just consistency. Katt Williams frames this as the central trade Hollywood offers. Keep your voice and risk isolation. Give up the edge and gain protection. Ludacris chose protection, and with it came stability, wealth, and longevity, but also silence. Silence about how the transformation happened, silence about what was asked, silence about what was surrendered. What makes Ludacris's case unsettling is not his success, but its timing. The moment he aligned, the doors opened wide. The moment his image softened, his career expanded beyond music into a permanent seat at the blockbuster table. According to Katt, that pattern is not accidental. It is instructional. Visibility is the reward for those who follow the rules. The system does not hide its favorites. It places them everywhere. Commercials, franchises, award shows, red carpets. The message is subtle but clear. This is what obedience looks like. This is what happens when you do not fight. Martin Lawrence, The Warning. Martin Lawrence was once untouchable. In the 1990s, he held a level of power few black entertainers had ever reached. He was not just starring in projects, he was creating them, writing his own material, shaping his own characters, building shows that reflected his voice, his culture, and his authority. The television series Martin was more than a hit. It was a declaration. Martin Lawrence proved that a black comedian could dominate ratings without asking permission or softening his edge. That kind of control made him dangerous. For a moment, the industry tolerated it. The success was too big to ignore. Films like Bad Boys and Life turned Martin into a bankable lead. Studios followed his lead instead of the other way around. He spoke freely. He challenged authority. He carried himself like someone who knew his worth. According to Katt Williams, this was the exact point where the system began preparing its response. Hollywood does not allow long-term independence. It waits. Then it corrects. The collapse came fast and publicly. Stories began circulating about Martin's behavior. Headlines painted him as unstable, unpredictable, out of control. One moment defined the shift. Martin Lawrence was photographed standing in the street, shouting, holding a weapon. That image became a symbol, repeated endlessly by the media. The context disappeared. The explanation never mattered. The narrative was set. Martin was no longer powerful. He was dangerous. Katt Williams insists this was not coincidence or random breakdown. It was punishment. When someone refuses to submit quietly, the industry does not argue. It reframes. Media narratives become weapons. Once labeled unstable, every action is questioned. Every word loses weight. Any future accusation is dismissed before it is heard. Credibility, destruction is cleaner than confrontation. It leaves no visible fingerprints. Overnight, Martin Lawrence went from leader to liability. Studios distanced themselves. Projects stalled. Conversations stopped. The same industry that once begged for his involvement now treated him as a risk. That shift sent a message far beyond Martin himself. It was a warning to anyone watching. Power without obedience will not be tolerated. What makes this tactic effective is its permanence. Even when Martin returned to the screen years later, the damage remained. He was still famous, but no longer feared. Still respected, but no longer in control. His edge dulled. His authority softened. The man who once dominated rooms now moved carefully. According to Katt, this is what discipline looks like. Not destruction, but reduction. The system did not need to erase Martin Lawrence. It only needed to remind him of the consequences. By allowing him back slowly, under supervision, Hollywood demonstrated mercy while maintaining control. The lesson was clear. You can return, but never as you were. Never with the same voice. Never with the same power. Katt Williams sees Martin Lawrence as a textbook example. Not a failure, not a cautionary tale about fame, but a deliberate demonstration of how the industry handles resistance.
I keep in my mental Rolodex, so I never can get too far off the path, because I remember those are the things that live on, and those are the things that you need.
When someone refuses to bow, the response is swift and public. The narrative changes. The crowd turns. The credibility evaporates. Martin Lawrence survived, but the cost was visible. His story lingers in Hollywood as an unspoken reminder. Talent alone is not enough. Control must be surrendered. And sometimes, the system does not punish. It manufactures. Tiffany Haddish, the manufactured star. Tiffany Haddish did not rise through the traditional comedy pipeline. There was no long, visible grind filled with years of packed clubs, legendary stand-up specials, or a slow build of an undeniable fan base. Instead, her elevation was sudden. One breakout film performance, and the industry moved fast. Talk shows, award ceremonies, magazine covers, leading roles. According to Katt Williams, this speed was not organic. It was manufactured. In comedy, skill usually reveals itself over time. Material sharpens through repetition. Presence grows through failure. Audiences follow consistency. Tiffany's rise skipped those steps. The system did not wait for mastery. It supplied exposure. Her face became familiar before her voice became defined. The public was told she was funny, successful, and important, and repetition did the rest. Katt argues that this is how Hollywood shapes taste, not by discovering talent, but by announcing it. Constant exposure replaced proven skill. Tiffany appeared everywhere at once, leaving no room for audience evaluation. If someone questioned her ability, the machine drowned them out with more appearances, more interviews, more praise. This saturation created the illusion of inevitability. When a figure becomes unavoidable, people stop asking why they are there. They simply accept it. Katt Williams frames this as strategic. Hollywood needed a specific type of figure, someone loud enough to seem wild, yet controllable enough to pose no threat, someone who could be molded, directed, and corrected without resistance. Tiffany fit that role. Her public persona leaned heavily on personal struggle, exaggerated storytelling, and emotional vulnerability. These traits generate sympathy, not challenge. They entertain without confronting power. Manufactured stars serve a purpose. They fill space while protecting the system from real disruption. By elevating someone without deep roots in the craft, the industry ensures loyalty. Without a strong foundation, dependence increases. Praise becomes currency. Silence becomes survival. The problem with manufacturing is durability. When success is built on exposure instead of skill, it becomes fragile. Once the narrative cracks, the support fades quickly. Tiffany's legal troubles exposed that weakness. Suddenly, the same system that elevated her slowed its investment. Endorsements cooled. Roles dried up. Invitations became selective. The machine did not defend her. It distanced itself. Katt Williams predicted this outcome. When reliability fades, manufactured stars are disposable. There is no long-term protection because there was never long-term belief. The industry does not mourn products. It replaces them. The silence surrounding Tiffany's decline speaks louder than her rise ever did. What makes this story unsettling is how common it is. Hollywood builds icons not to last, but to serve a moment. Once that moment passes, the spotlight moves on. Those without deep skill or independence are left exposed. Tiffany Haddish, in Katt's view, is not a villain. She is evidence. Evidence that fame can be assigned, that exposure can be engineered, and that when usefulness ends, so does support. The system giveth loudly and taketh quietly. Terry Crews, The Cost of Speaking. Terry Crews made a choice few people in Hollywood ever make. He chose truth over protection. At the time, he had everything to lose: a strong public image, a steady career, family-friendly appeal. He was known as disciplined, professional, and safe for major networks. Speaking out placed all of that at risk, but he did it anyway. And according to Katt Williams, the consequences proved exactly how the system works. When Terry Crews went public with his experience involving a powerful industry figure, the reaction was not support. It was calculation. The question was never whether he was telling the truth. The question was whether the truth was allowed. By choosing to speak, Terry broke an unspoken rule. He exposed behavior that thrives on silence. That alone placed him outside the circle of protection. The immediate response was subtle but damaging. Opportunities slowed. Conversations changed. Invitations stopped coming. Projects he was attached to quietly moved forward without him. No official statements were made, no dramatic blacklisting announcements, just distance. In Hollywood, distance is punishment. It allows the industry to deny retaliation while enforcing it. What makes Terry Crews' case especially revealing is his image. He was not a struggling outsider. He was not labeled difficult. He was physically imposing, financially stable, and widely liked. If someone like him could be sidelined for speaking, the message to everyone else was clear. No one is safe once they challenge power. The isolation hurt more than the lost work. Terry expected solidarity, especially from peers who publicly supported justice and accountability. Instead, he found himself alone. Some mocked him. Others questioned his strength. Many simply stayed quiet. The silence was louder than open criticism. It showed how fear spreads faster than truth. Katt Williams often points to Terry Crews as proof that the system does not protect honesty. It punishes it. Speaking out does not lead to healing inside Hollywood. It leads to exile. The industry prefers controlled narratives, not unpredictable truths. Terry disrupted that balance, and the response was swift. The emotional toll was visible. Terry spoke openly about the weight of being dismissed, doubted, and isolated. He followed every official process. He acted calmly. He avoided public attacks. None of it mattered. Once labeled a risk, the system treated him as one. This is where Katt Williams draws the sharpest lesson. People ask why others stay silent, why they do not speak about powerful figures. Terry Crews is the answer. He did everything right. He told the truth, and he paid for it with his position. Eventually, Terry rebuilt parts of his career. He found new platforms. He remained visible, but the cost remains written into his story. He is respected, yet distanced, known, yet contained. His experience stands as a warning to anyone watching closely. In Hollywood, protection is conditional. Speak within limits, and you are rewarded. Speak beyond them, and you are isolated. Terry Crews chose integrity over insulation, and the price was clear. Faison Love, The Placeholder. Faison Love's career is unusual not because of its success, but because of its stagnation. He has been visible for decades without ever truly advancing. Recognizable, yet never central. Present, yet never powerful. According to Katt Williams, this is not accidental. Faison represents a specific role inside Hollywood, not a leader, not a threat, a placeholder. Longevity without ownership defines his position. Faison Love has appeared in numerous films and television projects, often playing the same type of character: loud, crude, supporting, rarely given depth or authority. He has not built franchises. He has not created platforms. He has not developed a distinct body of work that commands loyalty from an audience. Instead, his relevance remains tied to proximity, being around stars, being remembered for moments rather than movements. Katt Williams argues that this kind of career survives because it does not challenge anything. There is no demand for creative control, no insistence on respect, no push for equity. The system rewards people who fill space without reshaping it. Faison Love fits where he is placed and does not attempt to move beyond it. Public alignment against dissenters strengthens this position. When artists like Katt Williams or others challenge Hollywood's power structures, Faison has often positioned himself as a critic of the critics. He mocks, he dismisses, he minimizes.
I only put on comedians that are funnier than me. Anybody that ever told you differently was a fat Faison liar. Faison said that getting a Netflix special is easy. I have 12 specials. Guess how many Faison got? 0.
This behavior does not elevate him creatively, but it signals loyalty. In Hollywood, loyalty to the system is more valuable than talent that questions it. By attacking dissenters, Faison reinforces the system's narrative. Rebels are framed as bitter, failed, difficult, unstable. Meanwhile, those who echo the industry's talking points are kept close. They are invited back, even if their roles never grow. Survival becomes the reward. Katt Williams sees this as intentional. Faison Love is allowed to remain because he does not threaten hierarchy. He does not inspire others to resist. He does not build independent momentum. He simply exists within the boundaries given to him. That predictability makes him useful. Survival through approval, not influence, is the key distinction. Faison Love does not move culture. He reacts to it. He does not lead conversations. He comments on them. His platform is not his own. It is borrowed, dependent on access granted by others. That dependence ensures compliance. What makes the placeholder role dangerous is how invisible it becomes. From the outside, it looks like success. Consistent work, familiar face, decades in the industry. But beneath that surface is a lack of power. No leverage, no voice, no protection beyond approval. Once approval is gone, nothing remains. Katt Williams uses Faison Love as a cautionary example. Not everyone is crushed. Some are contained. They are kept busy enough to survive, but never empowered enough to matter. They become background figures in other people's stories, reinforcing the system simply by existing within it. Finally, there is one name Katt treats differently. Not weak, not broken, but dangerous in another way. Steve Harvey, the enforcer. Steve Harvey's position in entertainment is not just successful, it is dominant. Multiple television shows running at the same time. Game shows, talk formats, books, tours, corporate partnerships. A constant presence across networks and platforms. What makes this dominance unsettling, according to Katt Williams, is not how much Steve has, but how little resistance he seems to face, despite years of criticism from peers within comedy. In an industry where dissent often leads to exile, Steve Harvey keeps rising. Katt Williams frames Steve not as a rebel who won, but as an enforcer who was rewarded.
Steve Harvey was admired as the king of comedy, a man who had built himself from nothing into one of the most powerful names in entertainment. He had the money, the fame, the respect, and the woman he always called the love of his life.
While other comedians were pushed aside, silenced, or publicly humbled, Steve's influence expanded. Accusations of stolen material, strained relationships with fellow comics, quiet resentment from those who felt erased. None of it slowed him down. That alone raises questions. Hollywood does not ignore noise unless the person creating it is useful. Image control is Steve Harvey's strongest weapon. He presents himself as polished, disciplined, and respectable. Suits replace streetwear. Smiles replace edge. Authority replaces risk. He speaks often about behavior, respectability, and knowing one's place. According to Katt Williams, this messaging is not accidental. It aligns perfectly with what the system wants broadcast to the public. Stay quiet. Be grateful. Do not challenge power. Steve's role in this framing is behavioral policing. He tells people how to dress, how to speak, how to act, and how not to upset those in control. Wrapped in humor and advice, the message lands softly but clearly. Do not rock the boat. Do not question contracts. Do not confront the system. Success comes from compliance. This is why Katt believes Steve Harvey is trusted. Power is not given to those who disrupt order. It is given to those who maintain it. Steve does not amplify rebellion. He neutralizes it. When tensions rise within the community, his voice often enters to calm, redirect, or scold. That role is valuable. It protects the structure without appearing forceful. Extreme dominance becomes the reward. The more order Steve helps maintain, the more platforms he receives. The more authority he projects, the more access he gains. In Hollywood, usefulness outweighs popularity. Steve Harvey is useful. Katt Williams contrasts this with artists who chose authenticity over alignment. Those voices faded. Steve's multiplied. Not because his comedy grew sharper, but because his positioning became safer. He transformed from a comic into a manager of tone, a gatekeeper disguised as an entertainer. What unsettles critics most is not Steve's success, but what it represents. If someone accused by peers can still dominate, then talent and integrity are no longer the deciding factors. Obedience is. The system protects those who protect it. Steve Harvey is not portrayed as a villain in Katt's story. He is something more dangerous. He is proof that power favors those who enforce its rules from the inside. While others are crushed or discarded, Steve thrives because he keeps the machine running smoothly. In the end, Steve Harvey stands as the final piece of the puzzle. Not the loudest, not the most gifted, but the most trusted. And in Hollywood, trust is the highest currency of all. 9 men, 9 careers, 9 different outcomes. But according to Katt Williams, only one system. If this video made you question the stories you were told, like the video, subscribe, and watch the next recommended breakdown on your screen. There are still more truths behind the spotlight, and we are just getting started.